Good afternoon and welcome, fellow councillors, officers and members of the public to South Kesteven District Council Planning Committee on Thursday, the 18th of November 2021. Sadly, on Monday, Councillor Bob Adams passed away. He sat as a chairman and vice chairman of planning at District for a number of years. He will be greatly missed, so please rise for a moment's silence. Thank you. I'm not aware of any fire drill taking place this afternoon, so if the fire alarm does go off, please vacate the building via the stairs and the meeting place is out the front. Can you ensure that your mobile phones are turned off so they do not disturb the meeting? Thank you. Also be aware that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed via YouTube. Thank you. I'm Councillor Helen Crawford and I will be chairing this meeting today. With me I have Councillor David Bellamy as my vice chair. We have principal planning officers Chris Brown and Phil Jordan. And legal services today is Stuart Timms, and democratic services we have Alice Atkins. Public speakers, please be aware that you have 3 minutes to speak and you will be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may finish your sentence, but not another paragraph. Ward councillors, you have 5 minutes to speak. Right, we will now go to the agenda. So apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Penny Milnes, Councillor Mrs Judy Smith, Councillor Robert Reid, Councillor Charmaine Morgan and Councillor Mrs Rosemary Cabry-Brown. Councillor Paul Wood will be substituting for Councillor Penny Milnes for this meeting only, and I'll now take a register of attendance. Oh, sorry, apologies. And Councillor Nick Robbins will be substituting for Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you. And if we could do the attendance register, please.
Madam Chairman, I just wonder if I might sort of say, possibly getting feedback, is it okay? Possibly one of the reasons for so many absences today, and apologies, is the fact that we've managed to clash meetings and we've got an important meeting this afternoon within the council of the peer review group. That takes place at 2:30. I'm supposed to be on it. I know the leader of the opposition is supposed to be on it as well. But it kind of makes it hugely difficult when we do clash these meetings. I shall play it by ear and depending on where we are in the agenda, may have to leave and give my apologies at 2:30. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's duly noted, but the reasons for the other committee members isn't for the peer review, but it is duly noted that a clash isn't good. Thank you.
Chairman, Councillor Helen Crawford.
Present.
Councillor Phil Dilks.
Thank you.
Councillor Penny Robbins.
Present.
Councillor Judy Stevens.
Present.
Councillor Jackie Smith.
Present.
Councillor Ian Selby.
Present.
Councillor Harish Bisnell-Singh.
Present.
Councillor David Bellamy.
Present.
Councillor Paul Wood.
Yes, present.
Councillor Nick Robbins.
Present.
Thank you. We'll go to item 2, disclosure of interest. Does anybody have any? Thank you to Councillor Selby.
Madam Chairman, in relation to application S21-1714, I shall be departing from the room at that point. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. That is item 8.
Madam Chairman, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Councillor
I
Woods.
declare interest in S21-0415. The fact I've spoken on this item before, I predetermined it, so I will speak on it as a ward councillor only. I won't take part in the debate and I won't be voting on it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Councillor Woods. Right, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October. Is everybody happy with those? Thank you, Councillor Bishnaz Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to raise a point on page 20, Madam Chairman, item 26, with regard to noise. This refers to the St. Martin's Park in Stamford. I would like, if you remember during the meeting, I was quite concerned about the noise mitigations there. I found the form of wording that is being used here is very loose. And we may be, when it comes to reserve matters, that we be hoisted by our own petard because we didn't make quite clear at the outline planning permissions. I would like clear clarifications of the measures that we would like to see, especially where you have got the retirement villages residents will be, that some kind of proper noise mitigations or limitations action be taken, like bunding or noise deflections or plantations. So I would like to be included when these consultations come for the proposal come forward for the development, that we would like to be there, and probably all our members here from the planning committee will be the same. And the next one also on the biodiversity on the 27th, I would like a bit more clarifications in terms of when these plans are being made so that we can have some input as well, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, that's duly noted. Chris, can you come in for me? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, may I just support those remarks? You know, it is, and I was going to suggest that we ask the planning officer, but thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors. With regards to the 2 conditions, councillors, both of them require full details. So in the case of condition 26, it's a detailed scheme of noise mitigation relating to that phase has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And similar words then for condition 27, which is no development hereby permitted shall commence until a landscape and environmental management plan has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. So effectively both conditions require full details for both of those to come back to the council as part of discharge of condition application. We have recently moved, so we do consult ward members now automatically with all planning applications. So we'll ensure that when those conditions come forward, we will consult with the ward members when the further details come forward before we then discharge those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Bismarck.
Thank you very much, Chris, for those. And I will really take that, you know, positively, and I would look forward for it to be when it comes forward that we are consulted on it and we have our input. Because, Madam Chairman, I'm very sad, yeah, because I have had to raise recently, only yesterday, the problem with regards to opposite Aldi, which is open today, with regards to the actual road layout there. Initially, in our planning application, we saw it here. It was proper filter road was going to be put in there for the bus.
I think we can't discuss that now because that is
Okay,
on the
Madam Chairman,
application. Thank
that
you.
is a reason what I
Yeah.
would like to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we've sorted that. Do I have a proposer for the minutes? Thank you. Councillor Bisnell Singh, seconder. Councillor Jackie Smith, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, the 28th of October. Is everybody happy with those for accuracy? And can I have a proposer? Councillor Jackie Smith proposing. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Penny Robbins, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's one abstention.
I don't think I was at that meeting.
No, thank you. So when I council,
Abstention, Madam Chair, and unfortunately I was ill
Yeah.
on that occasion. I'll have to say, Madam Chair, it's the first planning meeting I've missed since I've been on the planning committee. So unfortunately, my 100% record has gone down the pan, but never mind.
Never
When
mind.
you're ill, you're ill. Thank you.
Thank you. So 2 abstentions noted. Thank you. Right, we have some speakers with us today. So Councillor Bellamy, will you let us know who the speakers are, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Lady Chairman. Agenda item 6, S210415, District Ward Councillor Paul Wood. Chair of Claypole Parish Council, John Freeman. Speaking against, Andy Hay, Chair of Claypole Neighbourhood Planning Steering Committee. Speaking for the applicant, Robert Jays. Agenda item 7, S211907. District Ward Councillor, Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Sorry, yes, Councillor Baxter.
If I heard you correctly, you've said I'm speaking in relation to item 7. That's not correct. I'm speaking in relation to item 8.
Oh, item 8. Old Summerby?
No, Tullington.
Well, that's item 7.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm looking at the online agenda where it's number 7.
Uh,
I
It
don't know
might-
Number 7.
I don't know why the online agenda would be different from the actual agenda.
It is number 7. Yeah, I don't know. Pass.
I think the reference number's right, Councillor Baxter, S211907. Agenda item 8, S211714. Speaking against, Lara Steptoe, Simon Body, Linda Dodd, and for the applicant, Mrs. A. Selby.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 has been withdrawn by the agent and the applicant, so we haven't got that one to deal with today. Straight on to agenda item 6, and we have.
Madam Chairman, can I just ask, please, with regarding the item that's been withdrawn, when was it actually withdrawn? Because, you know, members here, we're all very, very busy and they're very time consuming reading these agendas. And it would be nice if we could have had some sort of notice to say that it has been withdrawn, so we can spend our time a little bit more productively on the other items. Thank you.
It was only a couple of days ago, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was, Councillor Selby, it was withdrawn after the agenda was published, but we can take that point that I think we can communicate that better to members of planning committee in future.
Thank you. Right, Phil Jordan will now give us our presentation for agenda item 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, members. So the first item on the agenda to be heard is application S210415. It's erection of 16 affordable dwellings and associated infrastructure in the sites north of Doddington Lane in Claypole. I've already been introduced, Phil Jordan, Principal Planning Officer. Just a short introduction. Some members will be aware that we're sat on Planning Committee on the 26th of August, that this item was previously heard at the 26th of August Planning Committee and had a resolution to approve the application. Following that meeting, there was some concern raised in relation to some of the advice given at that meeting, and therefore the decision has been taken to hear the application again in full. It's important members note, members that did take part in that previous debate, they're not bound by their previous decision or the previous way in which they voted. So the application will be heard again in full and members are free to vote in which way they see fit. The key issues with the development, I won't read through every single point there that's on the screen, the details in the agenda pack. I think perhaps the main issues or the main points they're going to be focused on is particularly around the local need for affordable housing and the principle of development. As I say, the other points will be covered through the presentation, and the detail is there in the agenda pack. So the site itself, members can see there on the screen, there's a plan of Claypole with various facilities and services marked on it. The red rectangle somewhere to the centre bottom of the screen, that marks the location of the site itself. The important point in terms of policy is that Claypole in the local plan is designated as a smaller village. However, members can see there on the screen there are several services and facilities, including a primary school, pub, a small village shop, village hall, play park, etc. Less relevant now, but just so for members' awareness that this larger site adjacent was the application that was withdrawn pending refusal, which was the market-led Larkfleet scheme adjacent to the site. So this plan is effectively the same as the previous slide, just a slightly sort of enhanced image there that you can see. So you can see clearly that the site is the southern half of this field. Just got my cursor. The access point would be off Doddington Lane here to the southwest of the site. And Doddington Lane itself then connects round and into the main part of the village. Again, I won't dwell too much on this slide. This is the accurate and submitted location plan, and you can see that the red line indicates the application site, and then the land in blue is also land which is within the applicant's ownership. That's that northern half of the field. So the scheme itself, I've got a sort of a 3D visual which I'll come on to, which illustrates things much better, but you can see from the layout slide that's on the screen there, the single access point into the site. And you've got properties that are generally in semi-detached form with some short terraces at the back of the site. There is a mixture of two-storey and bungalows within the application site. Quite a bit of work was done with the applicant at pre-application stage to improve the design of the scheme, and a lot of that was to do with ensuring this mature hedgerow at the front of the site was retained, or as much of it was retained as possible. Likewise, the layout allows for this existing hedgerow between the existing properties and the proposed development to be enhanced, and some further planting along there. The SUDS feature, which is the drainage feature, was moved more centrally within the site, and again has had some sort of landscaping placed around that. Again, the northern half of the site, currently that's an undefined boundary, and there's now proposed to be a new hedgerow put across there. And again, this hedgerow to the east of the site is now to be sort of fully retained, and that's really what defines this rural character of this part of the village. You're going away from the built form of the settlement into the countryside, and so it's felt it was particularly important to retain as much of those natural features and enhance them where possible. So this slide sort of puts that into 3D and shows what the scheme would look like. So you can see you've got effectively a pair of bungalow single-storey dwellings here on the entrance to the site, and also adjacent to that drainage feature. And then the rest of the properties within the site, semi-detached two-storey dwellings. and then these short terraces of 3 properties that are also 2-storey at the back of the site. This just shows, it's not the best plan or diagram on the screen, but what this is showing is that there's a condition attached to the recommendation that would secure these off-site highway improvement works, and these include an additional passing place on Doddington Lane and also a footway connection that links up to the existing, the extent of the existing footway stops around just where my cursor is here. So this would connect the front of the site with that existing footway on Doddington Lane. So this is just giving a bit more information and clarity around decision making from when the application was presented last time. So I won't apologise to members, but this is very much the planning decision making mantra, and it's what we're required to do by law. So the relevant legal provision is at the top of the screen there, and what that says is we must make decisions in accordance with the adopted development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. What's the development plan? The development plan is made up of the local plan, which members will be familiar with. It's also can be made up of neighbourhood plans where these have been adopted, or if they're not adopted, that they're a material consideration. And you've also got the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Plan where that's relevant. In this particular case, there isn't an adopted neighbourhood plan, and it's at a very early stage, as in there isn't a draft been submitted to the council yet, and therefore that doesn't have any weight. There's no relevant provisions in the Mineral and Waste Plan to this application. So the relevant part of the development plan for this application is the local plan. The local plan itself, we're in a good position as a council. It's recently adopted January 2020, and in October this year we had our 5-year land supply position confirmed by the Planning Inspectorate. So what that means is that we've got the required supply of land, and we can give full weight to the policies in the local plan. Important point, the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, that is a material consideration, and that is also important, but it's a material consideration and not part of the development plan. Just going on to the bottom of the slide there, there's various parts of the local plan that are relevant to this application, but in terms of principle, it's policy SP4, which is the edge of settlement policy, which is most relevant, and particularly the latter criteria in that policy around rural exception schemes. And the important point to make here is that the relevant paragraph in the NPPF, paragraph 78, is in conformity with that, with the local plan on that matter. So policy SP4 itself, what does it say? You've got the first half of the edge of settlement policy, which again members will be familiar with, and starting at criteria A, you have this need for community support, but you've got this exception for affordable only rural exception schemes, and this is where this part of the policy becomes relevant. So it says, as an exception to criterion A, which is that need to demonstrate evidence of substantial community support, a housing scheme which meets a demonstrable local need for affordable housing will be considered acceptable as a rural exception scheme, regardless of whether criterion A has been satisfied, provided it is supported by clear and up-to-date evidence that the proposal, and then there's a series of criteria. G is justified by local need and affordability from an appropriate local housing needs survey. I've highlighted the words justified by evidence there. It doesn't say it has to exactly match the evidence. It just says the proposal has to be justified by that evidence. Criterion H meets the affordable housing needs of households who are currently resident or have a local connection to the parish as defined by the council's published housing allocations policy. And then criterion I, the occupation of those dwellings are then secured in perpetuity. That's something we do through the legal agreement. And criterion J, there's no other more suitable sites available within the settlement. Again, I've highlighted suitable and within. That's to say the sites would have to be both suitable for the development proposed and within the settlement itself. This is sort of the tail end of the policy and isn't particularly relevant to the application before us today, as in it's not engaged, but I just wanted to run through this so members are aware anyway. This part of the policy does allow effectively market housing to be placed alongside affordable housing as a means of cross-subsidising that and then essential affordable housing. So what that means is that if there was a situation where the need was less than what was being sort of promoted to make the scheme viable, there is an option that the developer can put forward some additional market housing alongside a viability assessment in order to do that. But as I say, that hasn't been engaged in this particular case because the scheme that's before us is an affordable only scheme. So this slide, what evidence do we have before us in terms of local need? We have two bits of evidence that have been submitted by the applicant. We have a housing needs survey from February 19, and if you go to the bottom two boxes here, that says it effectively shows a need for 10 dwellings, and 7 of those dwellings, the respondents to that survey indicated they wanted a need for some form of affordable home ownership. There's 2 of the respondents which there wasn't clarity in the information, so we don't know the full detail there. And there was one property or one respondent that specifically stated a need for rented accommodation. Sorry, yeah. So what this table should do, sorry, is it then says which sort of size of property they were looking for. So yeah, that's correct. There should be a 6 in there, and then a 1 here. So that then gives the 7. In addition to that, the applicant also submitted an extract from the Council House Register dated 2020, and that extract it was sort of isolated down to those people with a direct connection to Claypole. And what that showed was that didn't give details of the type of properties they were looking for, but it gave information about who the respondents were, whether they were a single person, a couple, or in a family. What that bit of evidence did is said there were 13 respondents, of which 3 were families, 5 couples and 5 single, obviously on the council's housing waiting list looking for properties. So what we've done when we've looked at the evidence of need is we've discounted those where we either didn't know what they were looking for or the ones that were looking for rented accommodation, so we weren't double counting the need. And we've then effectively combined those looking for home ownership and those looking for rented properties on the council housing waiting list. And that's where we've established that the overall need based on the evidence in front of us would be for 20 properties. The scheme that's before us applies for 16. The important point is that those 16 that are being applied for, it is a mixed tenure scheme. And again, the final part of the work that goes with ensuring the scheme is appropriate is that tenure split is then secured through the Section 106. That's the legal agreement that would sit alongside the planning permission. So there would be a defined tenure split in that agreement, which then ensures that there's the appropriate balance between rented properties and affordable home ownership. I just wanted to put this slide on again to provide a bit more information to members. What is local need and how do we secure local need and how do we ensure that local needs met? It's one thing the local plan isn't particularly helpful on, that local need isn't clearly defined in the local plan. It's used in several of the policies. In relation to rural exception schemes, it's generally accepted that local need is local to that locality. So in this instance, Claypole and the sort of cluster of villages around it would define what our interpretation of local need is. What the legal agreement does is there's something we refer to as a cascade mechanism. So what that does is it ensures that the dwellings that are granted permission are offered as a priority to those people that in the first instance either live, work or have a direct family connection to Claypole and that defined cluster of villages. There's then a second tier to that provision in the legal agreement. So if that initial mechanism doesn't fill the properties, the priority is then offered out to people within the whole of South Kesteven. What the extract from the council's housing register showed was in March 2020, there was 178 people in South Kesteven who wanted to live in Claypole. So, you know, you can see that once you get beyond that first tier of that sort of mechanism of very local need, there is a very large need of people that would, you know, within the rest of the district would want to live in or currently want to live in Claypole. And then there is a third sort of catch-all mechanism that then allows effectively those houses to be filled if those first two provisions don't fill the properties. We have to have that provision in there to ensure that the properties wouldn't stand empty, and it's also a requirement of the Homes England funding, which registered providers rely on to bring these schemes forward. So just a sort of overall evaluation of where we are with this scheme. As I said at the beginning, Claypole is defined as a smaller village in the local plan. Policy SP4 does allow for development on the edge of such settlements as long as it's in accordance with policy SP4. The officer's assessment of the scheme is that the scheme before us is in accordance with policy SP4, and particularly those criteria around rural exception schemes. The scheme would deliver 16 affordable dwellings, of which 4 of them are proposed to be bungalows. The evidence before us, which I've been through on that table, that combination of the local housing needs survey and the council housing register, also the sort of dialogue that's taken place with the council's partnerships officer, it is why the assessment is that the scheme before us does meet that, or there is that demonstrable local need for this development. The design of the scheme, which I touched on, has been improved through pre-app discussions and also through the application going through the council's design pad process. The officer's assessment is that the scheme is in accordance with the relevant design policies in the plan. I think it's accepted in the report. There is some impact on that rural character of Doddington Lane, but it's considered to be suitably mitigated through the retention of those hedgerows and the enhanced landscaping. Again, there is some impact on the neighbouring properties adjacent to the site through that access, but that's what that equally does is it provides a greater separation distance between the proposed dwellings and the existing built form. The level of traffic that would be expected to go in and out of the site is, considered to be relatively low, and that impact isn't considered to be significant, that it would have any sort of adverse impact or any significant adverse impact on those neighbouring properties. The drainage strategy that's been put forward has been looked at and assessed by the lead local flood authority. That's considered to be acceptable, with the detail then secured by condition 4. Sustainable building policy, which we started referring now to as climate change in a broader sense. We've got that policy on there which would capture further details of that sustainable building criteria that would have to be submitted and approved by the council before they start the development. The Offside highway improvement works, that passing place, the footway connection, that's secured by condition, and equally there's a condition that would capture any details should that include any lighting. Landscaping detail and the further management of that landscaping again is captured through conditions 11, 13 and 15. And within the site itself, it's considered there's adequate parking and provision of cycle storage space. So the recommendation, again, I'm not going to read out that full text that's on the screen. It's set out in the addendum report at paragraph 3.14. It effectively recommends that the application is approved, subject to the conditions in the main report and subject to completion of a section 106 planning obligation that would capture that detail of the affordable housing. Second part of it B is that allows a set time for that legal agreement to be secured, and if we reach a point where we're not in agreement over that legal agreement, it gives provision to refuse the application. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'll leave the slides up because I think the speakers have got some further slides. So I'll control those as they speak. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that presentation. We will go to our first speaker, which is District Ward Councillor, Councillor Paul Woods. If you'd like to speak, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, members of the committee. Obviously, this application sits in my ward at Claypole, and I'm speaking against it, asking you to refuse it. I support the Parish Council's view on this. This proposal is for 16 affordable housing. It's a major development on a greenfield site on the edge of Claypole, as you've seen. Claypole is defined as a smaller village, and yet it has some facilities, but those facilities over the last few years have declined. So it's not a major service centre. In SKD policy SP2, it is on land adjacent to the previous application, which was recommended for refusal and now been withdrawn. The local plan does not identify this site for development, so it's not in the local plan. Obviously, I realise going on from that, there are other reasons why you might want to consider it, which I don't think you should. The overall policy of the local plan is to direct major developments to larger villages and supports mixed development, not proposals for 100% affordable homes in smaller villages, and Claypole is a smaller village. The land that it's proposed on is on the edge of Claypole. It does not link or connect well with the village. It's on a single track outside the village envelope. SKD local plan, paragraph 213, states that the site must be well located to the existing build form. Okay, it is adjacent to it, but it doesn't connect to it. You have to go down the single track along the footpath. So to me, the proposal is in open countryside and is not well located. Now, one of the major things that's been put forward for why you should approve it is the affordable housing. Policy SP4, I know the planning officers stated what policy SP4 is about rural exception sites, but they must be evidence that they're the most suitable site available and demonstrated need, a local need. And the evidence you've been presented, okay, they've done a survey which identifies a need for 7 affordable homes. And I noticed the chart didn't add up to 7, but I think that was just a typographical error that the 6 wasn't included. So that survey says 7. Then the planning officer, you've taken the housing register to justify the others. But I checked the housing register this morning for the whole of South Kesteven, and there's over 1,800 people registered on that housing register. So I'm a little bit worried that if you use the housing register of justification, you could almost use the housing register of justification for putting any development anywhere. So I don't see any recollection that you should use the housing register. And I would emphasise it's the housing needs. You should rely on the survey. And there is a little bit of demand for that. The housing register to me is not an accurate record that you should depend on to justify a planning development. The council housing register is being used to justify it, and I think that is incorrect. Also, Claypole borders onto Nottinghamshire. It's in the north of Claypole is a village in the North District of South Kesteven. It borders right up to the Nottinghamshire border. And I'm going to make the point here that Newark and Sherwood District Council, it borders up to the border. Newark and Sherwood plans are to build 3,000 houses right up to the boundaries of Claypole Parish, including affordable houses. Now, I know statistically, because I've spoken to the planning officer, they'll say, oh no, we're only interested in South Kesteven for our statistical right. But in practical terms, housing provision will be provided with those 3,000 houses built less than half a mile down the road from Claypole. So to say the justification for Claypole, it's not actually needed. In practical terms, any demand there will be satisfied by the massive development that has already started and underway at Claypole. I would therefore suggest that policy SP4 does not support this development. And I know that's contrary to what Phil Jones says, and I've got the greatest respect for you, Phil. I've always worked well, and I do appreciate what you say. But I would contend that doesn't do it. I mean, to me, yes, 1,800 on the housing register. So you could say we've got housing needs. But if we identify that, we don't want to provide houses in where people don't want them. If they're identified in the district and we want them in Claypole or elsewhere, there's no use building the properties in Claypole. Regarding the design, I also think if you notice on the design, you've got the roads going through it. Now that clearly indicates to me that the site to the north of it is open for development. So you've got to be careful when you approve this. I know we only look at the actual development of the site, but you've got the site immediately to the north of it. So really, you're opening it up for the whole lot. To me, the proposals are contrary to our plans, and I think it should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. We have our next speaker, which is the Parish Councillor, John Freeman, who is Chairman of the Claypole Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll tell you where the next slide is. Hello, I'm John Freeman, Chair of Claypole Parish Council. It's now established that this proposal has to be assessed against the requirements of the local plan, your policy document. It's a good plan and it hasn't been trumped by the NPPF. The report sets out that the key test, as we've heard, is from SP4 of the plan. It's in your papers at 3.2. It says that, again, I repeat these points, that any proposal has to be met, has to be supported by evidence of local need from a housing needs survey. The housing needs survey carried out by Community Links for the developer does not support the proposal to build 16 affordable homes in Claypole. Neither the number nor the product mix match up or align there. It's good that the council has committed to providing more affordable homes, but that's got to be done through the local plan, not in spite of it. The report contrives to make a case for this application solely based on snapshot figures from the housing register. You'll note the local plan does not accept the housing register as evidence of need. Can I have the next slide, please? This slide shows where Claypole sits in relation to Newark, 6 miles away, where residents of Claypole go to work, to shop, for services, for entertainment. It's why Claypole, which has none of those things, is classed as a small village without even a bus service to get people to and from work. It shows the sort of brownie hashed area is the Newark urban extension referred to by Paul, which will include 500 affordable homes, half a mile outside the village, 500 affordable homes. Go to the next slide, please. The recommendations of the housing needs survey are there. Sorry, the text is a bit small, but the first one is saying basically, with this need of 8 homes, don't build at all. They'll be met by the allocation just down the road in the Fernwood extension. The second one is saying, but if you do, then it's looking for a small development in that area. Can I have the next slide, please, Phil? The survey was carried out not just in Claypole, but 4 other villages that are all marked there in blue. They include 2 hamlets, Fenton, 4 miles up there to the northwest, Stubton, and then Dry Doddington and Westborough. You'll see that they're just outside Long Bennington, the red area, which is the local service centre. And in the local plan, the purpose of the local service centre is to support the small villages. There's a submitted application currently under examination by officers, S210655, application by Minster Properties to build 43 affordable homes on land that's already designated for housing in Long Bennington. So it's clear from the evidence that if 16 affordable homes are built in Claypole, more than twice the local need, then it would have to be filled by moving people to Claypole. And so you should ask, what is the sense, the justification in moving people on benefits in low incomes into a village where there are no jobs, no bus service to take them through to and from work, to a village where there's no doctors, surgery, pharmacy, where to get the supermarket they've got to take a bus 6 miles into Newark, when you could put them in the local service centre, where in Long Bennington, where there are jobs, where there is a supermarket, a post office, a GP surgery, and where there is a regular bus service into Newark. So thank you very much. I hope you will reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, Councillor Freeman. And our next speaker is Andy Hay, Chair of Claypole Neighbourhood Plan Steering Committee. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name's Andy Hay, as mentioned, and I chair the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Committee at Claypole. The planning officer has already said that our plan doesn't carry any weight because it's not complete yet, and that's true. However, it is well advanced, and critically, as you can see on this slide, we've surveyed the people of Claypole and to get input to the plan. And it was a very well responded survey. Over 30% of households replied, and that represented over 400 people. So I'm here more to represent the views of Claypole than just my own. And although the plan is draft, it does give us some very real data. Could we move to the next slide, please? So one of the questions we asked was what level of building would be appropriate over the next 15 years. And the median response to that was 11 to 15 dwellings. The platform proposal exceeds this in one fell swoop. And that's before you consider the half of the field that's left isolated by this development. Sorry, the next slide, please. And so, yeah, the half of the field, which you can see as a sort of question mark there to the north of the development. So this really shows a cynicism in the way that the proposal is presented. The half of the field that isn't included, you'll notice, is the half that's closer to the village centre, which clearly begs the question as to what will happen with this land in the future. And further development is the obvious inevitable answer. So rather than seeing this as an application for 16 affordable homes, the reality is that in effect, it's a securing commitment to double that number. So it's a backdoor attempt to circumvent the plans. And I do remember when we were here before, that was raised by a councillor, this question of securing sites by stealth. Sorry, the final slide, please. However, 54% of people in Claypole felt that some building is appropriate, limited, including lower cost houses, but fewer than this. And we're responding to those views by making allocations in our neighbourhood plan. We appreciate the world doesn't stand still, and we're not using the plan as our vehicle to say no to all development. And as the planning officer says in his report, the neighbourhood plan process that is underway would be the most appropriate forum through which the need for additional housing in Claypole can be explored. Claypole can grow, but in a way that's sensitive to the needs and limitations of the village.
30 seconds.
In conclusion, this application does overstep the local plan and neighbourhood plan, even when you consider it in its own right, and even more so when we look at the consequences of the half field. It would badly impair the rural feel and ambience of a lovely Lincolnshire village that's already threatened by the expansion of Newark. So we implore you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, could you turn the microphone off? Thank you. Sorry, did you want to say something?
Madam Chair, will I be able to ask a question to the gentleman? Just a quick question, Madam Chairman. Yeah. Will it be possible for you to clarify for us from your survey of 400 people, residents that responded to your survey, what percentage of that was in agreement with this development, or that they need the 16 affordable homes? I'm thinking as part of the consultation.
Sorry, could you turn your microphone on so it can be recorded? Thank you.
So that wasn't a specific question that we asked. We didn't want this was a plan for a 15-year period. We didn't want it to be too flavoured by the specifics of these developments, even though we knew that they were obviously on people's minds. One question we asked was around, so there were a number of questions that are relevant. One was, given that a lot of people supported the idea that some limited development was appropriate, should that be done in infill individual developments or more things that abutted the site, grew the size of the village? And the number was certainly in the single digits of percent. I can't recall the exact number, but I could provide that. I guess there won't be the opportunity to do that. But we were talking less than 5% wanting the growth to be done through a single development of this type. So that's probably relevant.
Right, thank you. That will do. That would answer that question. Thank you. We have our next speaker, which is the applicant, Robert Jays. Thank you. If you'd like to come up.
Madam Chairman, is the desk being wiped between each speaker?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today in support of this planning application at Doddington Lane in Claypole. It would be wrong not to highlight the disappointment of the Linden Group and Platform Housing that we are back in front of planning committee today, having only been made aware of that there was an issue with the previous committee less than 2 weeks ago. We have not been party to the independent legal advice referenced by the officer in his report and have not had the opportunity to take our own legal advice. We therefore can't comment on the legal issues raised with the last committee. What we can say is that we firmly believe the correct decision was made back in August, that being to support the planning application proposals. The application is for a modest scheme of affordable housing which will see a significant financial investment in the local area. No technical consultees have objected to the proposals, which in our view are well designed and would bring tangible benefit to the area. Only 13 letters of objection were received to the proposals, a number that equates to just 1% of the population of the village. There remains noteworthy support for the scheme, including from the head teacher of the village primary school. A major point of objection raised by the parish council is the need for the affordable housing dwellings proposed. We note the clarification on the need provided by the officer and welcome the fact that the officers consider that sufficient evidence of need is available to justify the support of the planning application. In preparing this application, the Linden Group have actively engaged with the Council's Partnership Project Officer, an officer we consider to be the most qualified person to determine and guide housing need in South Kesteven. Throughout the application process, that officer has been in support of the scheme and the need for the houses proposed. As this is the second time this application has been considered at the committee, I do not think it is necessary to repeat what I've said in my previous speech. This remains a well-designed scheme of much-needed affordable housing in a sustainable location. As demonstrated in the officer's report, the application conforms with planning policy, and we hope the planning committee will again vote to support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Now we will go to questions to the officers and debate. And
Madam Chairman, can I ask a question of the last speaker?
yes, you may. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you just clarify the ownership of the rest of the field, if I can call it that? Is the rest of the field in the ownership of Linden Group?
I'm sorry, but that's not relevant to this application. You can only go with what is on the application. You can't go and decide it on who owns what around. Am I correct there? Thank you, Legal Services.
Yeah, as a matter of law, you can see that from the plans. It's edged blue. They're telling you they control it, but it is not relevant. You need to look at what's being applied for in the red line area and concentrate on that.
I appreciate that, but thank you for the
Thank you. Thank you. Right, as I said, we will go to debate and questions to the officer. And Councillor Bellamy, you wish to ask a question? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Phil a question, please. Thank you for the presentation. 3.6 of the report says small sites used for affordable housing. The question is about how do you define what is small? Now, if I draw a comparison, when the Morton one that we had probably just over a year ago now, that was a rural site. It was an entry-level exception site as opposed to a rural exception site. But when we were deciding the entry-level one, we decided it against SP4, which was the same policy. That's right, isn't it, Phil? Yeah. Now, in 71 of the MPPF, which is the entry-level exception size, it does actually define how big something can be. So it defines how big the development could be. It does this. So basically, we used SP4 to decide an exception, entry-level exception site. What I'm saying is, would it be fair to use in a rural exception site? Would it to define what is small? Would it be fair to say that 71 is a guide, or even a rule, if you like?
I don't think so. I think what you need to do is, if you turn over the page in the page 100, you need to really read the rest of it. And it then goes on to say rural exception sites seek to address the needs of the local community by accommodating households who are either current residents or have an existing family or employment connection. And then it talks then about the market homes may be allowed at the authority's discretion. I think the key point is that there isn't a definition of what the scale of a rural exception scheme is, but what it needs to do is it needs to meet that demonstrable local need. What our assessment of the application is that it is doing that. And I think it is relevant to look at both the results of the local housing needs survey and to look at the extract from the housing register. And again, whilst I take Councillor Wood's point about there's 1,800 people on the housing register, we just looked at those initially that have that direct connection to Claypole, of which there were 13 back in March 2020 when that evidence was submitted to the council. So whilst the word small is used, I don't think we can, give it a sort of a geographical scale or is it a hectare? Is it half a hectare? Is it 10 dwellings? Is it 20 dwellings? I think it's it's driven by what the need is. And in this instance, we think the proposed development is appropriate to meet that need.
Sorry, thank you, Phil. Councillor Dilks next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate I'm not allowed to talk about the rest of the field. We're allowed to talk about other wider issues, like the affordable housing, like the need for the affordable housing, but there is a need for people to know what's happening with the rest of the field, I've got to say. So the point being, next week, this council will meet and we will be asked to approve design guidelines, which I very much welcome, and I'm sure we all do, which will improve things. And one of the things in those guidelines that we're asked to approve is the notion of discouraging hammerheads, with what I'd call hammerheads within the cul-de-sacs, basically. And whilst we talk about good design, the design guidelines determine that hammerheads and cul-de-sacs are not good design features. Now, I heard an earlier speaker or questioner mention the fact that why the hammerheads have been designed as they have, and that may or may not be true. We don't know that because we're not allowed to look at what might happen in the future to the rest of the field. But I've got to say, I don't like this application the way it is, because I want to see what the master plan is for the whole of the site. And to be told, it's actually within the control of the same developers, it's perfectly obvious what may or may not happen. So I just don't like it. And if Phil would like to sort of take that and comment, I'd very much welcome what you have to say. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I think the point about the rest of the field is that, whilst it is a possibility that could come forward, it isn't allocated. It currently is in the same ownership as the applicant. But in terms of the current policy, the only way of bringing forward that additional land would be as a rural exception scheme, and it would have to meet, go through the same process as we're going through now, and it would have to meet a defined demonstrable need. Given that this proposal is pretty much matching what we consider the local need to be, that further land wouldn't be policy compliant at this moment in time. So, but there could be some point in the future when it is. So I think you can have those things at the back of your mind, but essentially, the development before us today is that southern part of the field. In terms of the question about, hammerheads, good design, bad design, for a small site like this, there needs to be a means of, vehicles getting in and out of the site clearly, and part of that is the ability to go in, turn around, and ideally come back facing the right way. Really, those hammerheads, what we're looking at on the big estates is you get plenty of opportunities for sort of looped roads on big estates where you can continue in that forward gear. Particularly, you talk about bin lorries and things like that, where you can, pick up the bins, keep going, pick up the bins, and come out where you want to go. And you don't want to constantly be going down a dead end, shunting around and coming out again. But for these, it's quite small scale developments, it's quite difficult to design them without that, particular feature in. And if you look around, Claypole particularly, a lot of the newer development that has happened is in that cul-de-sac, short cul-de-sac form. So it is a sort of a characteristic of the settlement at the moment. But there's certainly no sort of like policy around it. Appreciate there is some wording around it in the design guide, which will become a material consideration. But on sort of the overall assessment of, is this scheme good design? It's been through that design pad process. It's been through extensive conversation with the council's urban designer, and our assessment is that it's in conformity with the design policy, and it would be very difficult to, I think, sustain a refusal on those grounds.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hear what you say, but just say one small thing. What worries me particularly, and I'll be careful what I say, and I appreciate we can't, look into the future as to what might happen, but should the rest of the field be given permission at any future point, it would appear that this access that we are now asked to create would be the access for building to go, for builders to go through. And as you know, we've got that problem in my ward currently now, that we're developing the front of the site first, getting people into those houses. We may well then be facing a request, to put building works through. I know I can't, I understand where we are with it, but I just don't like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ian Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, at this point in time, I'm a little undecided on this item, and I've got a question that I'd like to ask, and I'm undecided for this reason. On the one hand, I can see the need for the affordable housing. We've got the register, 1800 on the register. There is local need, in my view. I think that's without question. I think it's very, very important that in relation to the 106 agreement, and I do like what's been written in that, that you keep continuity of family life within a village, because it's when you've got family connections in the village, you keep that historical links with the village, and it's always so important to maintain that. In my view, I've seen it in other villages where, because there's no housing available, the youngsters, they have to move elsewhere, and as I say, then you lose that family link with a village. And for villages like Claypole, that link is so important in my view. So you keep that historical link, and you keep all the information, all the nostalgia that goes with it, I should say. So on the one hand, yes, I can see the benefits for this site, and also I have to say, regarding the site itself and the actual plan and the layout of everything, I like the layout, I have to say. I don't think it's an overdevelopment. They're not trying to cram too many properties in on that particular plot. I like the variety of housing, especially including the bungalows as well. I do like that, and I think that the layout and everything, it's very appealing. However,
I'm sorry, could we be quiet in the back there, please? It is very disconcerting for people to speak, and you've got laughter in the background. So please be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Madam Chairman. And then on the other hand, I heard one of the public speakers say that, if I heard correctly, and this is in relation to my question, I heard that there's no doctors' facilities. Is that correct in the village, please? And also in relation to the Nottinghamshire development of the 500 properties, I mean, are we aware of any medical facilities and health facilities, because they are a material planning issue? If there's no medical facilities are going to be with those 500 properties, then that exacerbates the problem for the people of Claypole, and this is where my dilemma comes. So I would like to ask, what medical facilities, doctor's surgery, that sort of thing, that are available for this development. Thank you, Carly.
Can you answer that, Phil?
I can say there's no GPs in Claypole, and I'm just going to look to the back of the room. And which GPs do you use? And
in the 3,200 homes, 500 of which will be affordable, no GP surgeries, no dentists, no chemists, no facilities of that at all.
No,
and that's Newark.
Yeah, no, the question is, which GPs do you use in Claypole?
Most people use GP surgeries in Newark. Some in the village do go to Long Bennington, the surgery there, which is our local service centre. Some go to Cape.
So Caythorpe, Long Bennington, or some using in Newark.
Thank you. Councillor Harris-Bisnossing, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll ask just one time preliminary for a clarifications to the officer, and then I would like to come back to ask my formal questions, please, Madam Chairman, if I can do that. Thank you. Phil, I would very much appreciate it if you could explain or clarify for me what does it mean when the applicant has submitted a geotechnical survey report with the applications which consider the potentials for the presence / absence of magnetically anomalous archaeological features. What does that actually mean? Is there an archaeological?
Yeah, so it's fairly standard with an application like this. It's effectively a ground survey that the developer would commission before development, and it can tell you a range of things. It can tell you what the drainage conditions are like, so it can help inform the drainage strategy. It can tell you about the presence of contaminated land, and it can also be used to, give some sense of is the potential there for archaeology within the site. So it's an underground survey that's carried out to give the developer some sort of, further information, I suppose, about any potential risk that they'd be taking on.
What was the conclusion of that? Were there any things come up with it?
I'll double check. I think there's so what we do with archaeology in particular is we consult with Heritage Lincolnshire, and then they give us a recommendation whether they'd like further archaeological work done or not. And I believe in this instance they've suggested a condition which then requires further archaeology work to be carried out before development would commence.
Formally. Thank you very much, Phil, for your excellent presentations. I'm a bit concerned about a few of the things, especially what actually the parish council chairman said. I feel that the local needs has not been quite established as local pertaining to Claypole, because in our own SP4, as you say, paragraph A, say demonstration at the edge of settlement development must demonstrate a clear evidence of substantial support from the local community through an appropriate or through proportionate pre-application consultations. Now, I don't feel that that has been satisfied as such, because under SP4, you're going for the item G, which is justified by evidence of local needs. And how I don't find these two things are correlating here when the other survey that was submitted to you was from in the neighborhood or a general area of it. So I feel it's not, we are not quite satisfying that particular conclusion of SP4. And also, I feel under SP2, for the smaller village policies, what's called developing hierarchy of SKDC local plan, nonetheless, the provision under, we come to SP4, state that when we are accompanied by clear evidence of local community support and demonstrate the local needs, but has the community itself been actually consulted on this, on that, which so far I'm feeling that not, even though there has been a survey done by the local plan chairman for it, but it was quite clear to me. This, I feel, it hasn't been established. Also, do you think that this proposed development still layout and the site layout would result in a form of development that is consistent with the prevailing urban morphology of the surrounding area or rural character? I would very much if you could clarify that for me, please.
Yep. So taking policy SP4, so criterion A, that's the need for substantial community support. That's the requirement for market-led housing. So this is a rural exception scheme. It's not a market-led scheme. You then go down to, well, it's the paragraph that precedes criterion G. It says, as an exception to criterion A, a housing scheme which meets demonstrable local need for affordable housing will be considered acceptable as a rural exception scheme, regardless of whether criterion A has been met. So we don't, it doesn't need to have, it doesn't need to demonstrate substantial community support. It needs to meet a demonstrable local need for affordable housing. So that's that point. In terms of, has the local community been consulted? That's been done through the application process. So we obviously have advertised the application and consult with neighbours. I think it's noted in the report there were 13 objections to the scheme, and someone gave a statistic of what that represents as an overall, a relatively small percentage of the overall settlement. The question about, you know, does it meet that local need? I think I've sort of been through that, and again, officers' advice is that we can consider it does. I think there's two subtleties I just want to emphasise. The first is the policy says it's justified by evidence of local need and affordability. That's the first bit, and as I say, the officers' advice is that we have got that justification. The third, the next point about will it actually meet that local need? Well, that's what the legal agreement does. The legal agreement says, as a starting point, you must offer this housing to those people with a local connection to Claypole. So that's actually secured through the legal agreement itself. And then, as I say, you have that cascade mechanism thereafter. So that there is provision to ensure that first and foremost that local need is met. The last question was really, I think, about, you know, the design of the scheme and is it appropriate for the context, and does it impact on the character? Clearly, building houses on what is a green field, it's always going to have a degree of impact. Is it appropriate for the context? Our assessment is that it is, and again, that's the work that's been done is largely around retaining those important natural features, the frontage hedgerow to the eastern boundary in particular, and then the planting of the new hedgerow to the north of the site. That's really what's going to make it, you know, assimilate into that existing context.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Mills.
Can I come back, Madam Chairman?
Quickly,
Because
other people wish to speak, so could you be quick, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll be quick. Because, okay, my train of thought, but unfortunately, as Councillor Ian Selby said earlier, you know, when the previous application for the 74 had been withdrawn, I had a chance to read through. And in that one, the recommendations was for refusal, and specifically under the SP4 for it. The proposal of site layout would result in a form of development that is not consistent with prevailing urban morphology of the surrounding area and would not positively assimilate it with the site's edge settlements. So I can't see any difference between that one and probably this particular smaller development that is in it. Is still the edge of settlement development. So I would say probably on the similar ground, probably may consider similar situations. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously the case officer for that application as well, so I know it well. You know, whilst as has been said already, we need to concentrate on the application that's before us. There were some significant differences with the design of that scheme, and in particular, there's a very popular public right-of-way that runs through the middle of the site. One of the significant concerns was around the treatment of that public right-of-way. So it was just aligned to the edge of a road, a pavement. There, one of their open spaces, the drainage feature, was situated right out to the north-east part of the site, and the layout of the houses effectively backed on to that area, and it's felt that wasn't a particularly good design feature. And there were some street trees, which I think we had this debate at the last committee, which some of them were in the residential part of the gardens, and then there was a further concern about, again, there were several properties backing onto hedgerows, which was a concern. So there were sort of clear differences, and that's why there was one of the conclusions around the design of that scheme was that it was, didn't meet the policy requirements, whereas this scheme has been through exactly the same assessment process. It's been through the council's design pad. It's had that dialogue with the council's urban design officer, and the assessment is in this case that the design is appropriate and would be policy compliant.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Milnes? No, Councillor Penny Robbins, sorry. It's been a long meeting already.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just picking up really where Councillor Dilks left off. I know we're looking at this development, but I just feel that this is all the hallmarks of a split development. Can the planning officer assure us as a committee that if a further development is brought forward, then it is treated as a whole site rather than a piecemeal, as I feel that this is probably where the developer is going, is trying to achieve. And also I'd noted with the neighbourhood plan, I would just say I wholeheartedly recommend that Claypole push on with their neighbourhood plan so they have a bigger and better say as to where any future development should be.
Sorry, I'm just coming into the site splitting. Normally that's done to avoid the requirement for affordable housing. So, often we'll see, if we do see it, it's normally you'll see a development for 9 dwellings and, the threshold for affordable housing being 10. And then if they did come forward with further land in the same ownership, the policy around site splitting, particularly for affordable housing, is very specific, and we would then consider it as a whole and look to capture what they should have provided for the whole site. In this case, again, it's slightly different in that it's 100% affordable from the outset. So they've every house is affordable. There could be other because it's already over the 10 dwelling threshold, the other requirements or the other infrastructure requirements that are reasonably related to this site have already been assessed. So it's not sort of dipped under the major development threshold to avoid anything, because it's already a major development above 10 dwellings. We've had to consult with education to see whether there's any education requirement, health, whether there's any education requirement, and they've had to provide a certain amount of on-site open space. So I think we can be, confident that if that further land did come forward, the starting point is the difficulty they would have is they've got to, demonstrate that that's acceptable in principle. They would have to establish that there's a further need for more affordable housing, assuming this development got approved. But then we would have to then assess what the infrastructure requirements are for that site in its own right.
Thank you. Councillor Judy Stevens, please.
It doesn't sound to me like it's a particularly good place to put affordable housing, because it's a village without any, it's not a sustainable situation, is it? So we're looking around I think for an excuse really to build on this field. And so we're saying the reason is because we're going to provide locally needed affordable housing. But actually, the people that want to live in affordable housing will need to have access to local services, and there aren't any. So clearly, this isn't a suitable place for affordable housing. Plus, also, I think we've really looked around carefully to find if we can find anybody that wants the housing there. So we've gone through the housing register in order to find those people. But you know, are we what we're trying to do? Are we trying to make something fit? Is that what we're trying to do? And also we're looking at one field, you know, and very clearly have been told the one with the red line is what we're looking at. But we've got a situation of the Emperor's New Clothes here, haven't we? Because while we're busy looking at the red line, we've got a bigger blue line, but they're not going to put a fun fair at the back, are they? Or they're not going to build a farm. That, you know, we've just got, as Councillor Dilks has pointed out, it's quite clear what's going to happen there. So, and then we're told that just down the road, there are going to be 500 houses, which is going to be able to accommodate in fact, half the housing register. So, you know, I'm sorry, I think this is a very cynical application. And also, just going forward, and I hope it does come up in our meeting next week, but if we are building affordable housing, I hope we're going to be incorporating sustainable methods of heating them going forward. Because if we're thinking about putting gas boilers in, that is not a sustainable way of providing affordable housing. I know we may not be looking at that now, but I'm just saying that, just for the record. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have anybody? Councillor Dilks, thank you.
Thank you for letting me come back, Madam Chairman. I just wonder, Phil, if we talk about the demonstrable need for affordable homes, and I'm, you know, I think we all want to see the right number of affordable homes provided across the district in the right places. But in this case, as Councillor Stevens has said, you know, this is on the border of another authority, Newark and Sherwood. And my question is, do we know how many of those people who have indicated they want to live in the Claypole area are on our list and are also on the list for Newark and Sherwood?
Yeah, I'll try and come back on a couple of points that have just come up in those last two sort of points of debate, I suppose. I think we need to be careful when we say it's not a sustainable settlement. The local plan defines this as a smaller village. So what the local plan does is it tiers the various settlements. It says Grantham's where the focus of growth should be, and then the market towns, and then the larger villages, and then the smaller settlements. But whilst it is further down in the settlement hierarchy, it's still considered to be a sustainable location for development because the policy allows it. The policy is permissive. It says for smaller villages, you can have development here provided it meets a demonstrable local need. I also think it's wrong to say there's no services in Claypole. As I showed at the beginning, there's a primary school, a shop, a pub, a play park, village hall, a church. You know, there are some services in the village. So I think we need to be clear that whilst it is further down the settlement hierarchy, it's probably wrong to say that it's somewhere where we can, certainly where the plan would say it's unsustainable for development. I think, the point about the sustainable building, we've got that condition which would capture those details and ensure that they would be appropriate in respect of what the policy says. The point about the Newark housing is that Newark has to meet their own housing needs. If someone living in Newark or Fernwood, which is that urban extension, wanted to occupy one of these dwellings, to meet the priority criteria in the that would be in the legal agreement, they would have to have a direct connection to Claypole or that defined cluster of villages. So they would have to either be working in Claypole, have a family member in Claypole, they wouldn't be living there, would they? Because we're saying they're living somewhere else. So they would either have to work there or have that family connection. If they didn't do that, whilst they're geographically close, they would be in that bottom category of prioritisation. So it would be very, very unlikely they would be housed by this development because of the requirements of the legal agreement. What's the one other question? I can't remember. Was that answered?
It was maybe, is it possible that people have put their names down for an affordable home in our authority and in another authority, a neighbouring authority, that's right next door, that Newark and Sherwood?
Yeah, I guess that is possible, although that extract from the housing register that I showed for, or that's been submitted for those 13 households, they've all got that direct connection in one way to Claypole. So if they were also looking for, let's say, affordable housing in Newark, they would have to meet the priority criteria for that area as well, if they were going to be successful. So they may do that by virtue of the fact they're living in Newark, and therefore they would automatically be high up on their priority. But they could be looking then to live in Claypole but the only way they were going to do that is because they've either got a family member there or they work there.
Yeah, thanks. But it's not actually in Newark that is the comparison. It's half a mile down the road from this site. That's my point.
Yes, sorry, when I say Newark, I mean Newark and it's greater, so Balderton, Fernwood, the urban extension, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair. Let me come back. Just in relation to my last question with regarding health and medical facilities, do we know, probably a difficult question for you to answer, do we know in relation to the 500 properties at Newark, whether there's any 106 agreement there in relation to health facilities and whatever? Do we know what they're doing? And also, could you tell us, please?
I think that part has already been answered by the village
councillor. Not really, Madam Chairman.
Well, you said there was no facilities being proposed for the extra 500, if I'm correct.
Okay, so that was in relation to Newark then. Okay. And also, can you tell us, please, the timescales with regarding their development? What sort of stage are they at with that 500 development as well, please? Thank you.
I don't think that's really relevant. I don't think that question is relevant to this application. Thank you. Councillor Bisnessing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick questions. With regards to the wordings of affordability, does affordability in the equation, does it take the cost of living? Because at the moment, cost of living just rose by 4.2%. I wonder if that is taken into consideration when you're thinking of delivering affordable homes.
Yes, I mean, affordable housing in planning terms has got a specified definition. It's in Annex 2 at the back of the National Planning Policy Framework. It's also in the local plan. And as I sort of really alluded to in the presentation, affordable housing can come in a variety of different forms. It can be an ownership product. So effectively, that's where you may only purchase 50% of the property. We can purchase 75% of the property. It's a way of getting people on the housing ladder without having to put down a big deposit. It can also come in various rented forms, and there's a clear definition of what's a affordable rent. It's a certain amount below what market rents are. I think it's a good point you've made about affordability generally. We've got to consider the evidence before us, February 19 and March 2020. What's happening to affordability generally is getting worse, I would suggest. affordability in South Stephen. I've seen figures where, certainly over the last year, 18 months, house prices in some areas have gone up, 20%. So I think affordability is, if it was an issue before, it's an issue that's on the rise. Lots of people home working now, people moving out of cities in the wake of COVID. As you say, cost of living going up. I think affordability is going to be it's a growing problem, and it's not something that's getting any better. But in terms of what the actual product is, as I say, it has to meet that clearly defined definition. And also in this instance, the provider, they're a recognised, what we call a registered provider. So this is what they do. They provide affordable housing, and they are also supported in doing that with grant money from Homes England. This just couldn't be built without that support of external grant funding. And whilst it's not a question, I think I just wanted to make that point as well. If you think about Claypole and what the rest of the plan does, it's going to be very difficult to bring forward any affordable housing in Claypole without a scheme like this. The other policy mechanism for doing that is SP3, which is infill, infill housing. And if you look at the infill sites in Claypole, they are typically, as the neighbourhood plan group said, single dwellings, 2 dwellings, 3 dwellings, this type of thing. And if that's the growth you're relying on in the village, that's always below major development, and there is no policy hook there at all to secure any affordable housing. So really, in these smaller settlements, the only policy means of bringing forward any affordable housing is through these rural exception schemes.
Thank you. Councillor Bisnessing.
So, thank you very much, Phil, for that answer. But do you feel, in view of that, our policy in terms of this 20% should be revised to be 24%, taking into account the current cost of living, just to reflect for the people that might be considering to go into these residences? Thank you.
Chris, if you'd like to answer that one for me, thank you.
So thank you, Chairman. I'll come back on that one. Thank you, Councillor. No, so effectively the 20%, or in this case it's 30% affordable housing, is the policy requirement in policy H2. That wouldn't be amended until the next local plan comes forward. So the next local plan, as part of their evidence base, will include a whole plan viability assessment based on that proposed spatial strategy. And as part of that will then determine the ratio of affordable housing required at that time when the next local plan comes forward. There wouldn't be a plan to increase that 20% for Grantham or 30% for the rest of the district at the current time. Effectively, what the cost of living increase is a temporary increase, and yes, it makes affordable need requirement go up, and if anything, is going to push our affordable housing requirement up that way. But we can't immediately change a policy without the new local plan coming forward.
Thank you. It's very sad when families have to move away from a village because they can't afford to buy, so they can be near their family, and that helps that village grow with the children going to school. And then when the village grows, you get to keep your shops and your pubs. We as a committee are always crying out for more affordable housing. We want more affordable housing, and here we have affordable housing, and not only houses, but we have affordable bungalows. We're always crying out for bungalows. We never get them on applications. So for me, to keep the village going and surviving, I think we do need to give this application. I'm sure that there is as much angst and people against the development that is next door when that wanted to be built. But you've coped with it, you've survived with it, and you've grown. Otherwise, I think you wouldn't have a shop, you wouldn't have the school. That would have all been gone, and you'd have been desolate. You'd have just been houses with nothing else. So for me, I'm going to propose that we accept this application, because for me, There are people that need the houses, and this is a place where they could go. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nick Robbins, could you just say it then, please, with your mic?
I second the approval of the application.
Thank you. I've proposed, and we've got a seconder. If everybody has finished speaking in the debate, because I don't think we're getting anywhere, we've gone round in circles, we'll go to the vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. Those against? 3. The motion has been carried then. Thank you. We will now take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I was just about to ask, so that we can get Councillor Baxter back. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, lovely. Now we're all back. We will go to agenda item 7 and we have Chris presenting this one. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Planning Committee. This application is reference S21/1907. The proposal is for alterations to entrance and road, including widening of access, walls to entrance, security hut, and 1.8 metre high fencing to the boundary. And the site is at Tallington Lakes Leisure Park. The key issues as part of this application are the principle of development, impact on highway safety, and impact on the character of the area. So this is an aerial view of the site taken from Google Maps. You'll note that the aerial view just concentrates on where the proposed access is. It doesn't look at the whole of the Tallington Lakes Leisure Park site. So the access proposed is off the Stamford Road, A1175, to the bottom, that's sort of the southeast side of that red marker there on the slide. And then again, this is again from Google Maps aerial view. This is a more zoomed in version. So again, you can see the site access there on the left-hand side of a secondary right-hand access, which I'll come to in a minute with further photos, that provides Lovell Lakes. So some photos from the site. If I start with the photo on the right, so that's a picture of the site from the outside. So this is taken from the roadside verge with that metal security fencing across the front of the access at the moment. The photo on the left-hand side is a view inside of that security fencing. Now this is the site as viewed from Stamford Road, which is A1175. This view here shows a view looking in an eastwards direction. So this is towards Market Deeping, if you like, from Stamford direction. The site access is there on the left-hand side, with then the secondary site access to a different part of the site to Lovell Lakes is roughly where that car is there in the centre of your screen. And then again from Google Maps aerial view, street scene view, this shows again, so you can see the Lovells, it's just there's Lovells Carp, so it's Lovells Fishing Lake access there on the right hand side. The access that's part of this application that we're here to talk about this afternoon is there on the left hand side. You can see at the time there's wooden gates at the time of this picture. As you've seen from the pictures on the previous slide, work has been done within the site to that access, and it's now got those metal security fencing across the front of it. So this is a proposed site plan. The site plan has been moved on its axis. So north is now on the left-hand side and west is on the southern side of that map now in front of you. The proposed access is shown on the right-hand side of the slide, access from the A1175, with a curved wall, which I'll come on to some elevations as part of my next slide. So there's a curved wall proposed with a widening of the mouth of the access to the A1175. The access then runs along the side of the existing boundary between the site and Lovell Lakes. And then towards the left-hand side of the slide, you can see there'll be 2 security barriers with a security hut as well in between. Again, I've got some further information to come on to about that as well. Shown on the slide there below the site access, so this is to the west of the proposed access road, is the existing boat storage yard, maintenance yard and building, and the boat and van park, which were also shown on those aerial views as well of the site. So moving on, these are the proposed elevations of the entrance walls. Again, the new access will be 13 metres wide and shown in the centre there of your screen. The walls are shown in sort of effectively a 2D view on the plan now, but the walls will be curved into the site. The wall itself will be just over 3 metres in height, with the copings and finials just a bit higher than that as well. Also shown in the centre of the site, centre of the slide there is laurel hedging is 2 metres in height down the length of the new entrance. So that's not within the site access itself, but forming a boundary between the new high access road into the site, and then that maintenance yard, boat yard, etc. I mentioned in the previous slide. It's important to note that any signage as part of the on those walls is not part of this application. That may require separate advertisement consent. And that forms a note to applicants as well as part of the application. So in terms of evaluation of the application, the principle of development is considered acceptable. The proposed access, widening of the access proposed wall is not considered to have an adverse impact on the character of the area. County Council Highways have been consulted and confirmed no objection to the proposal. They don't consider that the works of the access would result in a detrimental impact on highway safety. Just on the note of County Council highways, I'd like to mention that specific queries with regard to the access or this access were brought up at a meeting with residents and ward councillors at a meeting last week. As a result of that meeting, the case officer went back to County Highways just to ask further questions about their response to the application. And those comments from County Highways are on the additional items paper in front of you. So if I could just read from the additional items paper, County Highways have stated that I can confirm that I'm satisfied that a driver entering the highway at the access that is being proposed in this application to be improved has sufficient stopping sight distance visibility of any vehicle that may be approaching from their left or their right to judge if it would be safe to complete this manoeuvre. Had I not been satisfied, I would have raised an objection. Stamford Road to the west of the access is straight, and the road to the east of the access is a very shallow bend, but is away from the access side of the road, so there's a clear view for a distance much greater than the prescribed standards in both directions. Further information was also provided to County Highways from the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership with regards to accident data, with one incident recorded as slight within the past 3 years along this stretch of road. The response concludes that there is nothing to suggest any existing issues on Stamford Road within the vicinity of the access. I don't believe it would be possible to present evidence to support a request for refusing the grant of planning consent for upgrading this access on highway safety grounds. Coming back, the next bullet point suggests the application should be assessed on its own merits. So this application is simply for the works to the access only. There's not considered to be any conflict with relevant policies of the South Kesteven local plan or the MPPF. There is one further recommended condition. Again, this is on the additional items paper for reference, but I've also put it on the slide here. And this is with regards to further plans that are required for the security hut proposed. Now, the security hut shown on that site plan would not be a substantial building. It's simply a pod to enable someone to stand in between the in and the out barriers proposed as part of the access. Finally, moving on to the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions within the officer report, plus that additional condition with regards to the details of the security hut to be provided. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you very much for that presentation. We have a speaker, which is a county councillor. This is in his division, and he's also the district councillor for the neighbouring district ward. Councillor Ashley Bax, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee. I have come along because I've had concerns raised by a number of parish councils and residents in my division. One of those parish councils, West Steeping, is in my district ward as well, and it abuts onto the site. The site is sandwiched on a piece of road between a difficult staggered junction at King Street with West Steeping, a staggered crossroads, and in the other direction you have the junction at Barham Road, which is the current entrance towards Tallington Lakes complex, next to a car boot sale which opens once a week, and a filling station, and the infamous Tallington Crossing. When the Tallington Crossing opens, there is a race, often because it's closed for 45 minutes in the hour sometimes. There is sometimes a lot of frustration by drivers, which leads to coming out like a bat out of hell from Tallington and speeding along this piece of road. I would say it's always disappointing when applications are retrospective, when you are asked to approve things that have already been done. When hedgerows and verges are destroyed without formal permission, but the applicant has obviously put this in to get straight with the process. So it's a dangerous road already. There are quarries nearby, there are heavy lorries, there's cement works and so on. We have the hazards of a staggered junction. As I say, I've had comments from residents of Tallington, West Steeping, and from within the site who are concerned about the application. And it's mainly about the speed. So if it's just a 60-mile road, there are less likely to be accidents than if there is a new junction. And I would point out that it is although the gate may have been there for a long time, this is a new junction which hasn't been open for, I would say confidently, decades, that this hasn't been used as a regular access to the site. The main access is off Barham Road. It's a difficult left turn, and I don't know if you remember the picture that you had of the levels site and the new access next to each other. One of the concerns is that traffic turning left out of the Tallington proposed entrance and traffic turning right out of the Lovell's proposed entrance will be impeding each other, and that may well take their mind off the very busy road which they're trying to cross. Also imagine on a dark night a caravan coming from the Deeping direction or from the eastern direction, a caravan trying to turn right in unfamiliar circumstances on their holiday, thinking that this is the entrance to the Tallington Lakes Leisure Park, turning right in the dark when the Tallington crossing has just opened and cars, motorbikes and other vehicles are heading across. At least there should be either a ghost island or a no right turn or some kind of additional traffic measure, because the junction is not safe or will not be safe if it is opened in its current form. So just finally, I have had at least one comment where somebody said, well, actually, I live on the site and it will take me less time to get to work. So I can understand that some people will find it easier, but it needs to be managed really carefully. And I think it's going to massively increase the number of the amount of stationary traffic at that point in that busy road. So I would urge you to think very carefully and reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. We have no other speakers on that, so we'll open for questions and debate to the officer. Do I have any questions? Councillor Dilks.
It was just the word debate that caught me. Thank you. I would thank Councillor Baxter for calling this into the committee. I'm not, you know, my division is a couple of miles away from this one, and so is my district council ward. But I've been contacted as well, you know, by people within the site. One particular gentleman who's actually died in the year since he called me to say how horrendous this was going to be for him, being able to get in and out of the site, driving his car. He was very, very concerned for all those things. I don't want to repeat the things that Councillor Baxter has said quite rightly. I regret that we didn't have a site visit, I've got to say, and I accept and I can see the Google photographs, but I only actually saw one car on all of them put together. And as Councillor Baxter said, when Tallington gates are raised, it is a racetrack. And as he said, if you can imagine, you know, a caravan turning right, unfamiliar with the road, they're going to be blocking cars going in the Stamford direction, and they're going to try and get in a gap. It is going to be horrendous. I also worry, and perhaps this is my question to Chris, if I may, the planning officer. Could you say a little bit more about, you mentioned barriers, I think you did, a security barrier. Well, it concerns me, you know, if you've got 3 caravans trying to turn right into that site, and that's not beyond the realms of possibility or likelihood, you know, where are they going to queue up to actually get past the barrier that is going to be down when they arrive? I understand, of course, that highways have said, as they usually do, no problem, it's fine. I'm sorry, Chairman, but I just wonder what planet some of these people live on sometimes. This would be absolute madness to allow this. Thank you.
Chris, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. If I can just pick up on the point about the barriers, and then so effectively your point was if cars and caravans turn into the site, you don't want them filtering back onto the main road. I take it that's your main point. So if I can come back to the site plan, which I've got up on the screen now, if you can see my mouse here moving around on the left-hand side, So that's the proposed position of that security hut I mentioned and the proposed barriers over here. So that's a significant distance. I don't have that exact distance in front of me, but I can show you that on the aerial view in terms of just to give you some perspective. So here's the access point down at the bottom here, if you can see my mouse. That proposed barrier, so that building there is shown on that site plan, and the barriers are proposed just beyond the end of that picture there. So there would be a significant distance. I mean, in terms of numbers of cars, it may even be double figures in terms of cars plus caravans. I appreciate it'd be less than that, but I imagine you can still get easily 3 or 4 cars plus towing caravans off the main highway into the site before then they'd reach that security barrier. So effectively, we wouldn't have any concerns. I fully appreciate the point made. It's the same, if you like, with gates to driveways, that type of thing, that you don't want cars queuing back onto the main road. We don't foresee that as being an issue with this proposal. Thank you.
If we just say, I welcome that, and that is some mitigation, I have to say, but you still would have the problem of, maybe 3 caravans trying to turn right, blocking the road, and the gates suddenly raise at the Tallington crossing. And, it is, when the gates close, I've lived in the area 40 years, and when the gates close, you can be waiting a long time for them to open. And traffic backs up right through the village of Tallington and out the other side. Usually, it's not unusual to have to wait before you get into Tallington for the thing. And quite often people will race through to make sure they get through before it drops again, as it often does. And so it is a race, as has been said, and it's just not a good place for what appears to be a main exit onto an existing busy road. I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Woods.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I must admit, I find these applications extremely frustrating, actually. We've had them before when local people, local district councillors, local county councillors, the parish council know there is a problem there on highways grounds. And we get the usual response from Links County Council Highway, don't wish to restrict the grant of permission. And that puts us in a difficult position, doesn't it? Because if we want to refuse it on highway safety grounds, I'm sure people will say back to me, well, highways haven't got a problem with it, so what's the problem? But it's been said to me in the past, and by senior people at Links County Council Highways, yeah, but SKDC make the decision. But how can we make the decision when we don't get any supporting evidence? And time again, they always come back. It seemed to me to take the easy option, don't wish to restrict the grant of permission. And I've had similar cases myself when I've had arguments with them. And this seems another typical case when all the evidence from local people who know the area, and I must admit I live at the other end of the district, but I do know where it is, seem to say there is a problem here, but Links County Highways don't back that up. So it's a bit like, what can we do about it? Have we got any evidence that it is, apart from local people here say? Do we have to follow what Links County Council Highways say if we from local evidence don't agree with that? So, I just find the whole thing frustrating, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. The point I'd make is, so you're correct. So on page 134 of the agenda, that's where Highways comments are printed in full, and their standard response at the time was does not wish to restrict the grant of planning permission, as you mentioned, Councillor. Subject to there's the standard highway informative about the section 184 works the applicant would have to do with the county council. And then a further note with regards to some signage as well. So that was their standard response. That's the response we received, publicly published, and it is on the agenda. It was in light of those comments from residents that were raised at this meeting that was held last week that we as officers went back to the county council to effectively push back a bit and say, can you please outline a bit further to us your comments sort of just beyond the does not wish to restrict the granted planning permission. And that's what's published on the additional items paper. So they were the comments I read out earlier. And effectively, they've just doubly confirmed that they are satisfied with the visibility displays and the stopping distances in both directions within a 60-mile-an-hour zone. And further, we pressed them with regards to highway safety as well, because that was raised at that residents' meeting. And again, they've gone back and they actually provided to us the data from the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership with that shows the pink dots on it for accidents. And in this case, on that stretch of road, there was just one slight incident recorded as slight, i.e. not major and not severe and not a fatality within the past 3 years on that stretch of road. So it was their conclusion that's in italics at the bottom there on the additional items paper to suggest that I don't believe it would be possible to present evidence to support a request for refusing the grant of planning consent for upgrading this access on highway safety grounds. So unfortunately, I appreciate your comments with regards to highways, but we have pushed back in this case. They have provided the additional information to us we requested and confirmed that they are doubly happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow up on that, Madam Chairman. I appreciate what we've said, and I do appreciate that Chris has no doubt followed up on it. But there will come a point at some time when we'll have to start employing our own highway specialists to challenge Lincs County Council if it goes on like this, won't it? I'm not necessarily saying in this case, but I just don't think we can totally rely on what Lincs County Council Highways say. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Selby.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. First of all, thank you very much to Chris for the presentation. It's a very fair point about when the barriers do open that, it does become a racetrack. However, it is a straight road as well. Chris has pointed out the statistics regarding any accidents there. However, a couple of questions. One is with regarding the actual entrance. I like the design, I have to say, Madam Chairman. Very appealing. I've struggled to find in the agenda the materials. Are we talking local limestone? I couldn't actually see it, but if it's local limestone, I've seen similar sort of entrances, very, very tastefully done, I have to say, Madam Chairman. My question is, another question is, it gives comments from West Deeping's Parish Council, page 134. Number one, it states at the top, its anticipated traffic movements will be an additional 4,000 per day. What I would like to know is, these additional vehicles, I mean, if you went from 9 till 5 and 8 hours, that's my maths work out, that's 500 per day. And if you worked out per minute, well, my maths is not that good. However, what are these additional, how are these additional 4,000 vehicles being created? What are they coming to look at the new entrance that's being built or what? So why the additional 4,000 new vehicles, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's what the Parish Council, West Deeping Parish Council, have come up. I don't know where they got their figures from. Do you? So we can't make a comment on that because we don't know where they've got their figures from. Possibly plucked out of thin air. Councillor Penny Robbins, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's two questions really. I don't know. I'm slightly confused with page 135 and 5.2.1. It says there's an objection letter here that says, can I also point out that one of the previous applications was approved on the condition that the entrance on Barham Road was to be the only entrance to the lakes. And now we're asking for another entrance. I don't know whether who is right or who is wrong on here. Number one. And number two, I've lived on that road. I know it's a really busy road. And I know the cars, when the barrier's down, do speed all the time to get through it. And I would be happy to, on this, to propose a deferral for a site visit, because I think that we must take a look at it before we make a decision on it. And it must include the time that the barriers go down. So then we've got more idea of what we're dealing with.
Can that, Madam Chair?
May I, Madam Chair? Yeah. It was to second it, but if a colleague already has, I welcome that.
Yeah.
Just one other point that I meant to add, and it is about the Tallington crossing. When approaching from the Deepings towards Stamford, as you pass this site, you can see if traffic is backing up at the Tallington crossing, so you can assess whether or not it is open or not. And if it is open, the tendency is to put your foot down a bit and get there a bit quicker so that you get over there before it shuts again, because you know that you might be there 10, 15 minutes waiting to get over and your journey is delayed. And then, so that's one point. And my other point is just on what the planning officer just said about there's no real problem of accidents along this stretch of road. That may well be, but we haven't had this access yet. And, what I'm trying to do is to prevent accidents and keep the accidents down. So I fully support, the need for us as a planning committee, if we are not going to refuse this today, to actually go and have a look at it. And whilst I accept we've got the Google shots and all the rest of them, what you don't sense there is what happens when the barrier goes up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bisnessing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I thought you forgot me.
How could I? How could I?
Yeah. I would very much like to know, Chris, if it is possible for you to say, has there been an estimation of how many vehicles will be entering and exiting the sites from the 1175?
Not for this access, no. So this access will remain, thank you, Councillor, as a secondary access. So the main access will still be on the Barham Road. So that will still be the main access to the site. This access will be a secondary access to the site. So no, there's no indication of vehicle numbers. What I would say is we have got an indication of vehicle numbers for the next door site access to the Lovell Carp Lakes. And they've even stated in their objection that access only receives between 5 and 30 traffic movements a day. So incredibly low numbers of cars using that access to the side of this. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, how do we know it's secondary access? Excuse me interrupting, but how do we know it's a secondary access? They're building a 3-metre wall, a grand entrance they're building. As colleagues have said, it looks very nice. This is a main entrance that we're creating here.
The access is proposed as 2 accesses, and this would be a second access to the site.
Thank you. Councillor Judy Stevens.
Yeah, there's a few. How do we know it's, they just because they say it's a secondary access and then build something with bells and whistles, as you say, it's obviously not going to be a secondary. Oh, it may even be, and it's also much more accessible than the other access, which is on a road off the main road. So I would suspect this will be the main entrance. Also, the backup from Tallington Crossing will go beyond this access most of the time. So you've got the additional problem of vehicles wanting to get in this main or secondary access, overtaking the stationary queue. Now, I wonder if that's been taken into consideration. Because actually, and I can't remember what you said about there not having been an accident down there in recent years. I know of some really bad accidents along this stretch of road, because the thing is, it's a very fast road. So if you're going to have an accident down it, it's not going to be, you're not going to glance your wing mirror. It's going to be a full-on crash, really. And the ones that I know about, that I've been party to, or been witness of, if you like, have been fairly serious accidents. And when Councillor Wood talks about getting our own highways, that's absolutely right. And I only have to say 2 words, and that's Prospect Place. Which was a complete abomination in my view, that Lincolnshire Highways were quite happy to make no comment on time and time again. I've never seen anything like it in my life, I mean, you could hardly play Lego around there, let alone get a car around there. It's diabolical. Anyway, that's a different application, obviously. There's a couple of things here that do concern me, though. And one is that there are approximately 500 caravans on site, but there's only a license for 385. Now, I know that doesn't appertain to this particular application. I'm just saying that in the hopes that somebody picks it up and we look into that, because there is a...
Thank you. We can't discuss that.
No, but you can hear what I'm saying.
Yes, and it is being looked into.
Yeah, so I'm saying it because I don't have the opportunity to say these things very often. So I'm here now and I'm saying it. So that's one thing. Definitely the highways is ridiculous, as usual. And the other thing is they've scrubbed up apparently scrubbed up already the hedgerow. And wasn't I right in hearing, Chris, that they're going to plant laurel? They are going to plant laurel. Well, I would definitely object to planting laurel instead of a natural hedgerow, because I don't know, what they thought, in fact, actually, it may well be, and, I take the point, some people may well like this kind of grand entrance, but to say it's out of keeping is the least of it. It's, this is a fairly rural setting, and to stick that in the middle of it with a laurel hedgerow is a total abomination. So if they've taken up the natural hedgerow, I definitely think that should be put back in again. And plus the fact that, of course, Tullington Lakes is, the clues in the name. There's lakes, and there's also Lovell's Lakes, which is very close by, which is a very natural area for fishing and so on. So a laurel hedge and a kind of fancy thing with finials and all the rest of it is totally out of keeping with the area, totally. And I think, it's again, the problem is, you see, is that you can defer to the legal process and say Lincolnshire Highways have made no objection, and therefore, we should go along with that because, they've had said, no, it's fine. But on the other hand, we're local councillors representing local people. The problem is that if there is a big accident there, which is probably on the cards, we're responsible for that. So morally, how can we say, yes, that's all good, we'll go along with that? Because that's the easiest thing, isn't it? The easiest thing is for me to sit here and say, actually, I've just come along, just put my hand up and that's fine. Because, it's 6:30, it's getting dark, we'll go home. But the point is that we've got a moral obligation to the people that we do represent. And when it comes to, matters of health and safety, that becomes even more appropriate. And so to not say it or to disregard it is really a very hard thing to do. So I'm not. So I've said what I've said, and I'm not going to vote for it.
Thank you. I think everybody's spoken, and we've had a proposal for a deferral, and that's been seconded. So we'll take on that a deferral with a site visit. Site visit, I take it, could be arranged. Yeah. I haven't got there yet. You're keen. Wait for it. So, all those in favour of deferral, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I have to leave now. Grandparent duties, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And we will go to item 8 on the agenda. And Chris, are you presenting this one as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon again, Planning Committee. This application is S21/1714. The proposal is for the erection of a 2-storey rear extension. The site address is the Conifers, School Lane, Old Somerby. The key issues raised as part of this application are impact on residential amenity and impact upon the character and appearance of the area. So again, this is now a review of the site. So this is from Google Maps. You can see the site there with the red arrow pointing towards it. It's located to the west side of Old Somerby and to the north side of School Lane. The application site is now in the centre of your screens. So it's not highlighted, but it is the dwelling right in the centre of your screen. It's a bungalow, as I'll come on to in further pictures, and sited between 2 other bungalows, and then 2-storey houses then form the row of dwellings north of School Lane to either side of that row of 3 bungalows. And that's the red line of the application site again, with the dwelling right in the centre of your screen.
Madam Chair, would you mind just going back to the previous one? I just kind of didn't quite get where it, right. I've got it. Which where the red car is. Thank you.
Yes, immediately north of the red car. Yeah, so that's a bungalow. There's 2 bungalows either side. You can see because they're orientated at 90 degrees to the rest of the row of dwellings. So all the other dwellings along in that picture there are 2-storey, other than these 3 bungalows, and this is the centre of the 3 bungalows. So yeah, so that's the red line plan of the application site. So moving on to some photos. So this is the front elevation of the existing dwelling. This is now taken from the road. So this is looking in the centre of your screen there. You can see the attached garage of the existing dwelling, dead centre of the screen. And on the right-hand side, that's one of the neighbouring dwellings, Shamrock. This is a photo of the rear garden of the existing dwelling. I should say beyond the site there to the north, you can see over the rear fence there is open fields. So this is now a photo taken from within the rear garden. This is now looking to a southwesterly direction. So in the centre of the picture there is neighbouring Sistra. So this is the west side of the dwelling. And again, then you can see the row of two-storey dwellings beyond neighbouring Sistra. And again, this is still from the same garden, now moved a bit closer to the dwelling. Again, you can see neighbouring Sistra there on the right-hand side of the photo. Now, I appreciate this photo is a bit overcast, but this again is the same point of the garden. This is now looking the other way. So this is a garden shed immediately on the left-hand side, the rear of the attached garage there, dead in front of you on the screen. And then you can see the roof line of the neighbouring Shamrock dwelling over on the other side, beyond the garage above in the centre of the screen. So these are the existing plans of the existing dwelling. Again, there you can see the bungalow then with the attached garage set to the set back from the frontage of the dwelling. Moving on to the proposed plans. So the proposal is for we've called it a two-storey extension. Effectively, it's a 1.5 storey rear extension. So the proposal at ground floor level is to extend the rear elevation of the dwelling to match the rear elevation of the existing attached garage, and then to have a further additional first floor above that. In addition to that first floor, so that raises the eaves and raises the ridge by 900 millimetres above the existing ridge line, as clearly shown there in the top middle. So that's proposed side elevation, with the frontage elevation at the top left of your screen. As you can see on the top right of your screen there, the proposed rear elevation includes a balcony. So that's an inset balcony within the proposed ridge line of the dwelling. Within the proposed ridge line of the extension, I should say. In terms of evaluation of this application, so the relevant local plan policy for householder applications is policy DE1. There is an Old Somerby neighbourhood plan in place. However, the neighbourhood plan is considered to be silent with regards to extensions. There are relevant policies with regards to new build development in Old Somerby, but there's not really a clear policy with regards to proposed extensions for existing dwellings. The key issues, as previously outlined, are the impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on the street scene, which is linked, and then impact on neighbouring amenity. Objections have been received from both neighbours to either side of the dwelling and from a further dwelling within the school lane. So just as a correction, I think that the report outlines 2 objections. It should read 3 objections. However, the points made in the committee report are still the same, even though the number of objections is 3 rather than 2. In terms of impact on the street scene, so from my previous slide, the proposed extension will be visible in the street scene. It will project above the existing ridge with the proposed ridge and eaves raised 900 millimetres. This has been reduced from the initial application that was submitted, which showed that extension to be 1.2 metres above the ridge and eaves line. So that's now been reduced by 300 millimetres to now be 900 millimetres above. I would point out that the proposed extension will be located to the rear of the existing dwelling, and the street scene is very mixed. So the street scene, as previously mentioned, is a mix of those 3 bungalows, the remainder of 2-storey dwellings, now with 6 further bungalows under construction at the far western end of School Lane, recently permitted. In terms of the street scene, it's also mixed in terms of front boundary treatments and materials as well. In terms of, do you want me to pause for a second, Chairman? Thank you, Chairman. I'll carry on and just stop there due to some background noise. So in terms of impact on residential amenity, in terms of overlooking impact, which has been raised in neighbouring objections from the proposed balcony at first floor height, I'd like to point out that whilst there is a balcony proposed, the balcony will only be accessible from the central third of the balcony floor space. So because the proposed balcony is sited within the proposed ridge, extension, as that if I can demonstrate the ridge of the proposal will come down at an angle, and therefore in terms of walking out onto that balcony, whilst that central third of the balcony will have more than sufficient head height to walk out onto, as you move towards the side of the balcony, there won't be sufficient head height to stand. Furthermore, that balcony is enclosed to the sides. There's no views directly from the side of the balcony. The overlooking impact is therefore considered to the rear gardens of neighbouring dwellings, and it's considered to be similar impact as if this proposal was for a two-storey dwelling, or if it were a two-storey dwelling with a view out from a first floor window over to the rear gardens of neighbouring dwellings. In terms of any overbearing impacts, the dwelling is set forward from neighbouring Sistra, which is one of the bungalows, and away from their boundary, and then set in from the boundary of Shamrock, which is the neighbouring bungalow on the eastern side, with the attached garage remaining and set in between the two dwellings. Therefore, to conclude, the proposal is considered to impact on the street scene and on neighbouring amenity. However, on balance, the case officer recommends that the proposal is not considered to be harmful despite an identified impact on the street scene and on neighbouring amenity. Chairman, I'll finish there. I'll keep the presentation up if that's okay. I've got some slides from a number of the speakers to carry on showing, and I'll go through those as they speak. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chris, for that presentation. We do have some speakers. The first one against is Lara Steptoe, please, if you'd like to come and speak.
Okay, I'm here on behalf of my parents today. The stress and impact of all of this on their mental and physical health has been enormous. And at no point has anybody, not the applicants, not the case officer, nobody has had the courtesy to speak to them or to understand the impact of this overbearing extension. I know this is a fait accompli and a waste of time. However, I would like to highlight some issues which have been ignored or dealt with by virtue of getting the applicant's perspective and not been independently assessed or verified. Firstly, the site plan that was shown up on there is inaccurate in terms of layout and shape. It should therefore not be used to determine the impact on privacy and light because it is an inaccurate reflection of the dwellings. Secondly, the report states that there will be no overlooking to patio areas or areas of garden immediately to the rear. This again is incorrect. This photo shows the view along the same line as the proposed balcony, although clearly it would be a few feet further to the right as it would be in the applicant's, within the applicant's boundary. The next photo is a scaled diagram which clearly illustrates the angles involved. From any point on this balcony, the entire garden is on view. Being west of the applicants, the natural direction to face when sitting on the balcony is towards my parents' property rather than to the north. The report acknowledges there is an overlooking impact, albeit incorrectly only identifying the far end of the garden, but states that this is not harmful due to existing overlooking from the two-storey dwellings on the other side. However, there is no current overlooking due to adequate separation distances, the siting of the garages, and the fact that the bungalows are set much further back from the building lines of the houses. It should therefore be considered that the acknowledged lack of privacy that this extension would create will in fact result in a harmful impact. I have asked for, but received no clarification of the statement that only half or 30% perhaps of the balcony is usable because of the height of the eaves. If this were true, then by definition, only 30% of the second story is usable. The bathroom, therefore, cannot be usable because of an inaccurate or inadequate head height room. If that were the case, such a ludicrous proposal would or should be rejected on the grounds of poor and or inaccurate design. The reality is, of course, that the whole of the second story will be fully usable and so will the balcony. The report states that there will be no impact on light. There has been no, despite a request, there has been no site visit undertaken, nor has an independent daylight and sunlight assessment taken place. A reasonable compromise here that would fit with the character of the village would be a single-storey extension, which would give them the additional room that they seek, have minimal impact on others and no impact on the street scene. In conclusion, legally, the council must be impartial in their evaluation of planning applications. There appears to be a lack of independent assessment and verification of the facts thus far in this case.
Thank you. I do take offence to you saying to this committee that it is a fait accompli. We all come to this committee with an open mind. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take your seat.
The inference was made by Ian Selby himself.
We have the next speaker, Simon Body, please.
While the speaker's coming, can I thank you, Chairman, for saying that word? That's exactly what I was going to say. And you know, you only have to look at the previous applications we've had this afternoon to see that this committee takes the planning applications before it very seriously and doesn't just take the officers recommend it. We challenge the officers and we challenge the system. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dilks. Please start when you're ready. Thank you.
I object to this proposal on the grounds of loss of privacy and detrimental impact on the street scene. I'm not sure if my objections have been noted or not because the report states only 2 letters of representation have been received. I'm aware of at least 3 submitted, so the fact that only 2 have been considered is a direct conservation of the council's own policies, which state that the council will take into account all responses received as a result of the consultations on planning applications. It would be procedurally irregularity to admit to take into account all representations. Despite several invitations from the neighbours to assess the impact of the proposal by undertaking a site visit, the case officer has not responded to any communications. Once again, this is not the approach detailed in the council's policy, and I quote, "A considerable amount of negotiations take place on applications, dialogues between planning officers, developers and the local community is something which the government and the council actively encourages." Since submitting my letter, the parish council have written and visited the neighbouring gardens and they've confirmed this would be a gross invasion of privacy if approved. I have 3 photos, please. Photo 1 is the current view from the street. The report acknowledges the street scene will be impacted. It also states in migration that this will be limited visibility of the extension. I'm not sure how that 4-foot hedge disguises a 20-foot extension. It's not even disguising the building as we're looking at the moment, despite an extension. There's a mismatch of materials which need to be considered as well. Photo 2, please, is from my own back garden. We currently benefit from privacy which should be lost through this development. The extension is so far back on the footprint, it's behind the building line of any of the 2-storey houses, as was shown on the map earlier on. We choose to live in a rural location where our dwellings are well planned in order to preserve and maximise privacy. The addition of a first floor balcony with the full width of the property creates the effect of visitors to a zoo and looking down on the animals. Finally, point 3 and my final paragraph, should we run out of time. Photo 3 is a screenshot of the, could you bring photo 3 up, please? I'll pause, please, because we haven't got photo 3. I would expect my time to be paused as well, please.
If I can come on the microphone, what did photo 3 refer to?
I can help you find it. It's a very important photo. And it's not been taken from my email that I sent in.
I'll let the, if we could let the Mr. Body finish and then I can come back.
Okay. I'll start again then, which is my final photo. Finally, photo 3 is a screenshot of the original
30 seconds.
The original application logged on the South Kesteven District Council planning portal. You'll be able to see on photo 3, the application was submitted by Mr. I. Selby, rather than the apparent owners of the property. As you will be fully aware, you cannot apply for planning on a property that you do not know. This was pointed out in my original letter, and whilst I received no application, the planning portal application has mysteriously and quietly since been altered to the names of Mr. and Mrs. Selby. This leads to obvious questions of bias and predetermination.
Thank you. If you'd like to respond about the photo, please. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I can just respond on that, Mr. Body has claimed the application was submitted by Mr. I. Selby. The application form clearly states that the application is on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Selby, which is not Mr. I. Selby, and the relevant certificate has been completed again by Mr. Selby as part of the applicant, not by Mr. I. Selby.
Thank you for that clarification. Linda Dodd, please.
I'm standing here in front of you today because our new neighbours seem to have the right to say I'm all right, Jack, but they are all right for themselves, but are robbing us of our privacy but keeping theirs. We call this being selfish. Why you should buy a bungalow to change it into a house is beyond us. No one on this committee has had the courtesy to come and look for themselves. To say we are disgusted is an understatement. We more or less know this has been approved. The first form to be filled in says any trees to be removed. The answer no, because the Selbys had already removed them along with other alterations in the garden as Ian Selby was taking it away in his trailer, along with rubble and part of the garage wall which has been removed. But we're sure the Selbys have a different story to tell. As we all know, they know how to get around rules and regulations. We've lived here for 22 years and we strongly object to this monstrous proposed extension. We both love our garden and the privacy it holds. With the extension, the balcony will be like having a watchtower watching over us. Also, our lighting to the lounge and bedroom will be affected. Please look at the photos our solicitor sent to you confirming this. Also on the conveyance of their register contains provision of light and air, so they are not complying with this as the covenant is made to protect neighbouring properties and to retain it as a bungalow. We have 3 bungalows and the middle one is the conifers, so the extension will impact on either side, lack of privacy and lighting to our lounge and bedroom. And where you get the idea from that we are overlooked by the house next door, we don't know. For one thing, they don't have a balcony, so it's a limited view through their windows, as shown on the photo. So again, come and have a look for yourselves. Also, we don't believe they can't access the full width of the balcony as they can access the bathroom, which is the same width and height. And the height of the roof has been amended, but only by a little and not enough to make a difference. You should come and have a look as this is changing from a bungalow into a house with a balcony, which is unheard of in this village. We have looked at other similar applications in SKDC, which have included balconies. Where there has been significant overlooking of neighbouring gardens, the applications have been rejected. As an example, one such case report stated, it is considered that the proposed rear balcony would result in an unacceptable degree of overlooking and loss of privacy, which would be detrimental to the residential amenities of the occupiers of the neighbouring property. It is difficult to work out why the overlooking and loss of privacy is acceptable in this case. If anybody can't be bothered to come and have a look for themselves, it only confirms everything I've just said at this meeting is a complete farce. And I'd just like to say this has caused much stress to both of us, especially my husband after having a heart attack and a triple heart bypass a couple of years ago. This worry we can do without.
Thank you. And again, I take great offence on behalf of this committee that you state that we've already made our minds up. We come to this committee with open minds. I guarantee that. And that is quite slanderous, I feel. Thank you. Right, the final speaker is the applicant, Mrs. A. Selby. If you'd like to come up, please. Thank you.
That's on, isn't it? Is it on? Oh, well, good afternoon, officers and the committee. We have used a highly recommended and very experienced architect. We felt he produced a very sympathetic design with no derogatory impact on the village. We have lowered the height as requested. Regarding the internal balcony, which I must stress, as we have had a lot of unpleasantness over it. My husband is an 88-year-old diabetic cancer patient, and it will improve his quality of life. And once again, I do stress the internal. As the officer's report is very comprehensive, I have nothing else to say. Just thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
If you would like to know about the trees, they haven't been removed. They've been reallocated in a different part of the garden.
If you could turn the microphone off, somebody. Thank you. Questions to officers? Do I have any? Councillor Stevens?
Just wondering what an internal balcony was.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor. So the proposed balcony, if I can point out, so this is the proposed plans now on the screen in front of you. So the external view of the balcony is that proposed rear elevation. So that's to the top right-hand side of your screen. So it's a glass balustrade across the front of the balcony, which would face northwards, so face out into the garden and beyond. As you can see, the roof slope there comes down to the sides of that balcony. So the actual eaves are only just above the existing eaves and come down below that glass balustrade. If you now look to the bottom right plan, I'll see if I can zoom in. I don't think I'm going to be able to zoom in while sharing, but I will try. Is that clearer? So the proposed balcony is shown where it says inset balcony across the middle there. So the proposed roof, that roof slope will come to the sides of the balcony. So there's no direct, that's what it means by an inset balcony. It doesn't project out. So quite often we get applications for balconies to existing, say, two-storey houses, which project beyond the existing rear wall. This would be within the existing, within the proposed rear wall, rather. It wouldn't project beyond out. It wouldn't be a walkout balcony. Beyond that, it would be within the line of the roof ridge.
So does that mean that the peripheral vision would be less?
That's the view that we've taken as officers. Obviously, you've heard from the speakers, they have a different view on that. The view that we've taken, so if I can, I'll try and zoom out and go back to the, if you can see that proposed rear elevation there. So in the centre of the balcony, where those, so that's the walkout doors from the proposed bedroom, that will have more than sufficient head height to obviously open those doors, walk out onto the balcony. However, as you move towards the two edges of the balcony, you can clearly see the roof sloping down, and that balcony is all enclosed within that roof. It doesn't project beyond that roof line. So therefore, the view that we've taken is, whilst there will be a potential overlooking impact to the rear to the rearmost element of the rear gardens to the neighbours, that would be of a similar nature as if this was a two-storey dwelling, as in the view out from a bedroom window, for instance. Our view is that if you were to stand on that balcony, yes, you could, easily the central third of that balcony is definitely usable. There's plenty of head height within the central third. However, it's not a case of you be able to walk to one edge and look directly across that way.
Sorry, while I've got my microphone on. Where are the nearest houses? Actually, so I understand that this is a row of 3 bungalows. Where is the next house in the road?
So that's the red line application on the screen. So the 2 bungalows are to both sides. So there's Sisara, I think I might have called it Sistra, Sisara to one side there, to the western side, and Shamrock to the eastern side. They're both bungalows. And then Halcyon, Charisma, for instance, going up that way, and Meadow Bank coming down then to the west. They're all 2-storey dwellings.
Sorry, so Shamrock and I can't remember the name of it.
Sisara. Yes, they're both bungalows.
They've got houses either side of them.
Yes, they do. Yes. So for instance, the conifers there highlighted in red is a bungalow. The 2 either sides of Shamrock here is a bungalow, and Sisara is a bungalow. Meadowlark and continuing then to the west, and Halcyon continuing to the east, are all 2-storey houses, and they're all 2-storey houses opposite as well, the south side of School Lane.
Thank you. Councillor Bishnassi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the presentations, Chris. Chris, will it be possible for you to project from there what will be the 45 degrees angle, if it is satisfied that rules from there, with regard to privacy?
Thank you, Councillor. So I'm just trying to find the best plan to try and demonstrate that to you. If you can see that, that's the proposed block plan in the centre of your screen there. So the existing attached garage is there. So if you can follow the hand of the mouse in the centre, so that's the existing attached garage. The proposed extension is highlighted in the bolder lines there, sort of where the mouse is hovering over. So therefore, the rear elevation of the proposed extension will match the rear elevation of the existing attached garage there. In terms of then a 45-degree angle from the rear of neighbouring properties, Shamrock is then set that bit set further away from the property. So because the attached garage runs along the boundary and the proposed extension will be set in from the attached garage, it won't go to the boundary. It provides that extra distance from Shamrock on that side. From Sasara, it is that bit closer, so there's no attached garage on this side. However, again, because Sasara is then set, the rear elevation is set slightly further back than the existing rear elevation of the conifers. Therefore, the proposed extension, again, isn't considered to result in an overbearing impact. The other thing I'd mention in terms of overbearing impact is the north arrow is incorrect. So the north arrow is actually pointing down on that plan. So if I can go back to I'll go back to the red line location. Okay, that's noted in terms of the photos. So the photos also demonstrate exactly what I'm trying to demonstrate as well. So that's the rear elevation there. So you're looking at the windows then on their rear elevation. So if I keep going the other way, and again, so that's looking at Sisara then on the western side, and then again Shamrock on the other side with that attached garage. And then in terms of, if I go back to the red line location plan, so yeah, all the properties there, so the balcony and the rear gardens are all pointing north or slightly northwest.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Earlier this afternoon, we considered or reconsidered an application because on the grounds that we didn't want any question, presumably, of our integrity, as a committee. I hear what people say about site visits, and I think it is important, particularly given the fact that there is a relationship here with a sitting councillor, a good friend of mine. I'll say that. But having said that, I am uncomfortable in voting to determine this application without physically seeing it on the ground. And so I would be happy and ask for your support in voting for a deferral for a site visit on this application. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Bellamy.
Yeah, just to add something to what Councillor Dilk said, just to confirm also, we'd like it minuted that nobody on this committee has been lobbied by Councillor Ian Selby.
Good point made, thank you. And that was seconded by Councillor Bisnessing.
I don't think I didn't even know, Madam Chairman, if I can say, I didn't even know until it's come up right now that there was that relationship. So yeah, I think that probably goes for most of us. Thank you.
So we've had a proposer and we've had a seconder. Should we go to the vote on that? So all those, sorry.
I was going to recommend approval actually, because there's houses either side. It's not as if there are no houses here.
Right, well,
but if you want to do a site visit, I'd go along with that. But it does seem
we'll go
unnecessary.
with that proposal first. All those in favour of deferral and a site visit, please raise your hand. That's a majority. Thank you. Thank you. We'll go now to item 9, which is really at this point just for noting, as sadly Jonathan Short is poorly at the minute, so he can't present this. So I don't know if you want Chris to go through with it or just read it and note it, and then we'll bring it back at a later date. Are we happy for that? Yes, of course you can.
The only comment I'd like to make is that we never seem, well, on this one, and when I asked a question when we had the briefing from the enforcement team, is how many total ones are outstanding. I mean, I can't see that on there. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it would just be nice to have what the total outstanding were. I mean, my point is that if more resources are needed, you can't really tell by just judging how many cases have been resolved, you know, and comparing it with other years. Like I say, so I know think I'm right in saying that when Jonathan Short started, there was about 800 outstanding cases. And I think the last time, going back at least 6 months, when Councillor Adams was still chair, was the last time this was presented to us. But I think at that time it was down to about 300. But we had got the third person starting in the team. So it just would be good to see what, you know, the backlog is, whether it's come down or whether it's gone up. And just so that the cabinet member or whoever can judge whether more resources are needed in that area.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of the people that bring enforcement to our attention, they're not actually in breach of anything. I know I've reported things and it hasn't turned out that they're, you know, inflicting. So, but that's duly noted, and we'll ask that for the next time. Councillor Bisnell Singh.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I would like also to add to this list. There is 2 very long outstanding.
We can't actually talk about anything that may be outstanding now, any particular cases. You will need to raise that with Jonathan Short, please, and discuss it outside.
Can we make a note of it, Madam Chairman,
No.
number 24?
No, if you could, because they may be enforcements, there may be legal difficulties and all sorts of things. So we're not going to discuss anything that may be live at the minute. Can you bring that up with Jonathan Short, please? Thank you.
Even though if something's taking more than 20 years, Madam Chairman?
Yes, bring it up there. Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I assume we've dealt with that item. I just wanted to, with your indulgence, say 2 points, if I may. Next week at full council, I put a proposal forward, a motion forward, which I hope will promote more focus on climate change mitigation. I won't go into it now, it's not the time, but I would urge all members and ask all members to look at it and see if they can support that motion. And secondly, members will be aware, I'm sure, of the application for a giant solar farm that has come in that won't be determined by this authority, but by the Secretary of State. And I just wanted to ask, are we a formal consultee on that process, and will it come before this authority, or sorry, this committee? Thank you.
I will pass that over to Chris or Phil. Phil, would you like to answer that one? But I believe we are going to have a briefing on it at some point shortly. Thank you. Phil. It will be for the whole council.
Oh, I see.
Could you repeat the question, please, Phil? For Phil.
It was just on the application for the large solar farm that has come in, that I understand will be determined by the Secretary of State, not us as the local planning authority. I was asking, are we a formal consultee, and how will the process work? And I was hoping that, and asking, will it come before this committee for us to form the response from this authority, if we are indeed a consultee? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So apologies, I heard Phil and I wasn't sure whether it was, there was a few Phils around. Yeah, so it's quite early stages, or very early stages. My understanding is they're looking to submit the formal application in about a year's time. What they're carrying out at the moment is almost a pre-consultation, that they've got a duty to carry out, a statutory duty to carry out a pre-consultation, and this is almost a this is non-statutory before that. We are very important in the process, and our views are very important. I think in this initial round of consultation, what we're looking to do is go back to the promoters of the site and seek some further member briefings. So we're going to go to them with some dates, and there's been a few members that have asked for some further briefings around that. Once you get into the formal statutory consultation,